It's our stories. Welcome to a world where real stories sounds like a movie script.
You think you know what a bad boss is? You have no idea. I went through a living hell where I was stripped of sleep, money, and dignity, turned into an office slave. But I didn't just quit, I destroyed them all. This is the story of how one report turned a thriving company into absolute ruins. I'm going to tell you a story about murder. Not the kind with a gun or a knife, and not the kind that leaves a body on the floor. I'm talking about the murder of the human spirit. I'm talking about how you can kill a man slowly, hour by hour, spreadsheet by spreadsheet, until there is nothing left inside him but a cold, dark void. And the worst part? You thank them for it while they're doing it. My name doesn't matter anymore. Let's just call me the survivor. 3 years ago, I landed what I thought was the dream job. It was at a company called Apex Logic. Downtown, 40th floor, glass walls, espresso machines that cost more than my first car, and a view of the city that made you feel like a god. I was young, hungry, and stupid. I thought I had made it. I didn't know I was walking into a slaughterhouse. The man running the show was Richard. That's not his real name, but it fits him. Richard was charismatic. He was the kind of guy who could sell ice to a polar bear and make the bear thank him for the privilege. During my interview, he looked me in the eyes with this intense, predatory focus and said, "We don't hire employees here. We recruit warriors. We are a family. We bleed together. We win together." It sounded intoxicating. It sounded like a purpose. I signed the contract without reading the fine print. I didn't notice the clauses about mandatory availability or the vague wording around overtime compensation. I just saw the salary figure and the title. I was blind. The first month was the honeymoon phase. Richard bought us pizza. He took the team out for drinks. He patted me on the back and told me I was a rock star. But it was all a grooming process. He was fattening the cattle before the slaughter. The shift happened gradually. It started with a request at 5:50 p.m. on a Friday. Richard came to my desk smiling that shark-like smile. "Hey, champ," he said, his hand resting a little too heavily on my shoulder. "I know it's late, but the client in Tokyo just sent some revisions. I need you to handle it. It's a great opportunity for you to show your dedication. Should only take a few hours." A few hours turned into all night. I left the office at 4 a.m. on Saturday. When I came in on Monday expecting a thank you or maybe some comp time, Richard didn't even acknowledge me. He just dropped a new pile of files on my desk and said, "We're behind schedule. Pick up the pace." That was the trap. Once you say yes once, you can never say no again. By the third month, the mask came off completely. The family rhetoric became a weapon. If you tried to leave at 6 p.m., Richard would sigh loudly. He would look around the room at the other exhausted, gray-faced employees and say, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I guess not everyone shares our vision. I guess some people are just clock watchers." It's a shame, really. I thought we had a team of leaders. The guilt was suffocating. You didn't want to be the weak link. You didn't want to be the outcast. So you sat back down. You opened your laptop. You canceled your dinner plans. You canceled your gym membership. You stopped calling your friends. My life shrank to the size of my cubicle. I stopped seeing the sun. I would arrive at 7 a.m. when the city was gray and cold, and I would leave at 11 p.m. when the streets were empty. My apartment became nothing more than a storage unit for my sleeping body. I stopped cooking. I lived on vending machine chemical trash and stale coffee. I remember looking in the mirror one morning, about 6 months in. I didn't recognize the face staring back. My skin was gray, like old parchment. There were dark purple bags under my eyes that looked like bruises. I had lost 15 pounds. I looked like a ghost haunting my own life. Richard thrived on it. He seemed to feed off our exhaustion. The more tired we were, the more powerful he felt. He would walk the rows of desks like a prison warden, checking screens, criticizing formatting, making grown men stutter with fear. He created an environment of pure, distilled paranoia. He encouraged us to snitch on each other. If someone took a lunch break longer than 30 minutes, Richard knew. And if he knew, you paid for it. He stopped paying for overtime. "It's built into the bonus," he lied. "We're a startup culture. We invest now, we reap the rewards later." But the bonus never came. The rewards never materialized. There was only the grind, the endless soul-crushing grind. I remember one specific Tuesday. I had worked 14 days in a row without a single day off. I was hallucinating from sleep deprivation. The letters on my screen were dancing. I felt like there was a tight metal band around my chest, squeezing my heart. I went to Richard's office. I stood in the doorway, shaking. "Richard," I croaked. My voice sounded weak, pathetic. "I need a day off, just one day. I feel like I'm going to collapse." Richard didn't look up from his phone. He was scrolling through Instagram, looking at watches he bought with the money he stole from our wages. "Collapse?" he laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You're 25 years old. You don't know what tired is. When I was your age, I worked 90 hours a week and I thanked my boss for the opportunity. Do you want to be successful or do you want to be average? Because right now, you're sounding very average. Go wash your face. We have a deadline." I walked out of his office and something inside me cracked. It wasn't a loud crack. It was a silent fracture in the foundation of my sanity. I went to the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and pressed my forehead against the cold metal door. I didn't cry. I was too dehydrated to cry. I just stood there, breathing in the smell of bleach and despair, and I realized, I am a slave. I am a slave in a suit, and nobody is coming to save me. The isolation is what gets you first. Before the anger, before the revenge, there is just loneliness. My girlfriend, Sarah, was a saint. She tried to understand, she really did. But how do you explain to someone that you can't come home because a man in a three-piece suit is holding your future hostage? "He owns you," she told me one night, her voice trembling with tears. It was 2 a.m. I had just walked through the door, smelling of stale office air and anxiety. "You're not the man I fell in love with. You're a shell. You're a zombie." I tried to argue. I tried to tell her I was doing this for us, for our future. But the words tasted like ash in my mouth. She packed her bags 2 weeks later. I didn't even have the energy to stop her. I watched her leave from my window, and then I turned around and opened my laptop. Because Richard wanted the quarterly projections by morning. That is how deep the brainwashing went. I lost the love of my life, and my first thought was about an Excel spreadsheet. But that wasn't the breaking point. The universe has a cruel sense of humor, and it saved the worst for last. My father had been battling cancer for a year. I had missed his birthday because of work. I had missed Christmas because of work. I had missed the moments when he was still strong enough to talk. I carried that guilt like a stone in my gut every single day. It was a Thursday in November. The sky was pouring rain, battering against the glass walls of our office prison. My phone buzzed on my desk. It was my mother. I knew. You always know. That specific vibration, at that specific time of day, it screams tragedy. I picked up. Her voice was broken, barely a whisper. "He's fading, honey. The doctors say it's hours, maybe less. You need to come now. Please, he's asking for you." My heart stopped. The world around me froze. The sound of typing, the hum of the server room, the chatter, it all vanished. There was only the cold grip of panic. I stood up. My chair fell over with a loud crash. I didn't care. I grabbed my keys. I ran to Richard's office. He was in a meeting with the VP of marketing, laughing about some golf trip. I burst in without knocking. "My dad is dying," I said. My voice was raw. "I have to go, now." The room went silent. The VP looked uncomfortable, looking down at his notepad. Richard slowly turned his chair to face me. He didn't look sympathetic. He looked annoyed. He looked like I had interrupted his lunch order. "Mark," he said slowly, "calm down." "I can't calm down. He's dying, Richard. I need to leave." Richard stood up, walked around his desk, and leaned against the edge, crossing his arms. "I understand this is difficult, but look at the calendar. We have the merger audit tomorrow. You are the only one who understands the legacy data. If you leave now, the audit fails. If the audit fails, the merger fails. If the merger fails, this company goes under." I stared at him. I couldn't process what he was saying. "Are you insane? My father is on his deathbed." Richard's face hardened, the mask of the cool boss dropped completely. And my company is on the line. Look, Mark, life is about choices. Tough choices. If you walk out that door right now, don't bother coming back. You're done. No severance, no reference. I will make sure every recruiter in this city knows you abandoned your post during a critical crisis. I will ruin you. He paused, letting the threat hang in the air like toxic gas. Then he softened his voice, which was even more sickening. Think about it. Your dad, he would want you to be responsible. He would want you to secure your future. Stay, finish the data. You can visit the grave on the weekend. You can visit the grave on the weekend. Those words hit me like a physical blow. Time seemed to stretch. I looked at this man, this well-groomed, wealthy, sociopathic monster, and I felt something inside me die. The fear died, the ambition died, the need for approval died. And in the empty space where those things used to be, a new feeling was born. Something cold, something sharp, something dangerous. I looked at my phone. My mom had texted, "Hurry." I looked at Richard. "Okay," I said. My voice was dead flat. Richard smiled. "Good man. I knew you had it in you. Now get back to work." I walked back to my desk. I sat down, but I didn't open the merger file. I didn't go to the hospital. I knew I wouldn't make it in time, even if I left now. The hospital was 3 hours away in traffic. I had already lost him. Richard had stolen my last goodbye. I sat there, tears silently streaming down my face, dripping onto my keyboard. And I made a vow. I swore on my father's soul that I would not just quit. I wouldn't just sue. I would burn this entire kingdom to the ground. I would leave Richard with nothing. I wiped my eyes, I took a deep breath, and I opened a new folder on my computer. I named it Project Icarus, because Richard wanted to fly close to the sun, and I was going to be the one to melt his wings. The next 3 weeks were the greatest acting performance of my life. I deserved an Oscar. I walked around the office with my head down, shoulders slumped, playing the role of the broken, obedient dog. Richard loved it. He thought he had won. He thought he had finally broken the stallion and turned me into a plow horse. "See," he told me a few days after the funeral I barely attended, "focus is everything. You're doing great work, Mark." He had no idea that every time he opened his mouth, I was recording him. I bought a high-fidelity voice recorder, small enough to tape under my collar. I started recording every meeting, every motivational speech where he threatened to fire people for going home to their families, every casual admission of wage theft. But audio wasn't enough. I needed paper. I needed the smoking gun. I knew Richard was cooking the books. You don't force people to work 40 hours of unpaid overtime a week just for passion. You do it to hide labor costs, to inflate profit margins for investors. I needed access to the raw payroll server, access I didn't have. But I knew who did. The CFO, a nervous man named Gary who drank too much at lunch. I started staying late, not to work, but to watch. I mapped out the security patterns. I learned when the cleaners came. I learned that Gary wrote his passwords on a sticky note inside his top drawer because he was too old to remember them. One night at 11:30 p.m., the office was finally empty. The cleaning crew was on the floor below. The silence was heavy, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was it. I crept into Gary's office. I didn't turn on the lights. I used the flashlight on my phone, keeping the beam low. I found the sticky note. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. I logged into his terminal. What I found wasn't just negligence. It was systematic, industrial-scale fraud. Richard wasn't just stealing our overtime. He was categorizing full-time employees as independent contractors in the tax filings to avoid paying benefits. He was altering timestamps on the server logs to make it look like we clocked out at 5 p.m. every day. He was pocketing the difference. We were talking about millions of dollars in stolen wages and tax evasion. I plugged in my encrypted USB drive. The progress bar on the screen seemed to move in slow motion. 20%, 40%. Suddenly, I heard the elevator ding. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded my veins. Who comes in at midnight? I heard footsteps, heavy, confident. The smell of expensive cologne drifted down the hallway. Richard. He had come back. Maybe he forgot his phone. Maybe he was meeting a mistress. It didn't matter. If he found me in the CFO's office, logged into the payroll server, it was over. He wouldn't just fire me, he'd bury me legally. He'd claim I was stealing trade secrets. The footsteps got closer. I could hear him whistling. He was happy. The sound of his happiness made me want to vomit. "Gary?" Richard called out. "You in here?" I killed the monitor light. I dove under the heavy oak desk, curling into a ball, clutching the USB drive. I held my breath. I prayed to whatever God was listening. Richard walked into the room. I could see his polished shoes inches from my face. He stopped. He stood there for what felt like an eternity. The silence was deafening. I was terrified he could hear my heart beating. He walked to the desk. He tapped his fingers on the wood, right above my head. Tap, tap, tap. Then his phone rang. "Yeah, baby," he answered, his voice dripping with sleaze. "No, just grabbing some cash from the safe. I'll be there in 20. He opened the safe in the corner, took something, and walked out. I didn't move for 10 minutes after the elevator doors closed. I lay on the floor, shaking, sweat soaking through my shirt. But I was smiling. I had the drive. I had the recordings. I had the emails. I had the nuclear codes. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I called in sick. Richard left me a voicemail screaming that I was testing his patience. I didn't listen to it. I was too busy sitting in the waiting room of the Department of Labor, clutching a binder that was 3 inches thick. The intake officer, a woman named Ms. Hernandez, looked tired when I sat down. She probably dealt with petty complaints all day. "What do you have for me?" she asked, sipping her coffee. I placed the binder on the desk. I placed the USB drive on top of it. "Everything," I said. "Wage theft, tax fraud, coercion, unsafe working conditions, and I have it all on tape." She opened the binder. She read the first page, then the second. She stopped drinking her coffee. She looked at me, her eyes wide. "Is this verified?" she asked. "Every single byte," I replied. She picked up her phone. "Get Agent Miller down here, now, and call the district attorney's office. We have a big one." I walked out of that building feeling lighter than air. But the job wasn't done. They needed time to build the case. They asked me to go back in, to be the inside man for a few more days. Going back into that office was like walking into a cage with a tiger, knowing you have a gun but you can't use it yet. Richard was more abusive than ever. He sensed something was wrong. He was paranoid. He started screaming about leaks and loyalty. "If I find out someone is talking," he hissed at a staff meeting, staring directly at me, "I will destroy their life. Do you hear me? I will make you unhireable." I stared back at him, my face a mask of boredom. Inside, I was laughing. "You don't get it, Richard. You're already dead. You're just too arrogant to lie down." Doomsday arrived on a Tuesday. It was a beautiful, sunny morning, the kind of day that makes you glad to be alive. But inside the office, the air was toxic. Richard was on a rampage. He had found a mistake in a report, a mistake he had made, and was blaming the intern. He was screaming, his face purple, veins bulging in his neck. The intern was crying. I sat at my desk, sipping my coffee. I checked my watch, 10 a.m. Right on time. The elevator doors opened. Usually nobody pays attention, but the sound of heavy boots on the parquet floor is hard to ignore. 6 agents walked in. They wore navy blue windbreakers with Federal Agent and Department of Labor emblazoned on the back in bold yellow letters. They were followed by 4 uniformed police officers. The silence that fell over the office was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb about to go off. Agent Miller, the lead investigator, didn't hesitate. She walked straight towards the glass office. Richard looked up. For a second, he looked confused. Then he looked furious. He stormed out of his office. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Richard bellowed. "This is private property. I'll have you all arrested for trespassing." Agent Miller didn't even flinch. She held up a warrant. "Richard Sterling, We have a warrant for the seizure of all electronic devices and financial records. We are shutting down this location pending a federal investigation into wage theft, fraud, and racketeering." "Racketeering?" Richard laughed, but it sounded hysterical. "You're insane! Call my lawyer! Get out of my building!" "Sir, step away from the computer," an officer said, putting a hand on his baton. "I will not!" Richard screamed. He lunged back towards his desk, probably trying to delete files or hide the ledger. That was a mistake. Two officers grabbed him. Richard fought back. He was thrashing, screaming, spitting. "Don't touch me! Do you know who I am? I am a pillar of this community!" They spun him around and slammed him against the glass wall of his own office. The sound of his expensive suit hitting the glass was the sweetest music I had ever heard. "Stop resisting!" the officer shouted. The click of handcuffs echoed through the silent room. Richard was panting, his face pressed against the glass. His eyes were wild, darting around the room, looking for someone to help him, looking for his family. Nobody moved. Nobody said a word. We just watched. Then he saw me. I was standing by my desk, arms crossed, watching the show. I wasn't hiding anymore. I locked eyes with him, and I smiled. A cold, hard smile. His eyes widened. The realization hit him like a freight train. He knew. In that split second, he put it all together. The doctor's appointments, the silence, the late nights alone in the office. Doomsday arrived on a Tuesday. It was a beautiful, sunny morning, the kind of day that makes you glad to be alive. But inside the office, the air was toxic. Richard was on a rampage. He had found a mistake in a report, a mistake he had made, and was blaming the intern. He was screaming, his face purple, veins bulging in his neck. The intern was crying. I sat at my desk, sipping my coffee. I checked my watch, 10 a.m. Right on time. The elevator doors opened. Usually nobody pays attention, but the sound of heavy boots on the parquet floor is hard to ignore. 6 agents walked in. They wore navy blue windbreakers with Federal Agent and Department of Labor emblazoned on the back in bold yellow letters. They were followed by 4 uniformed police officers. The silence that fell over the office was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb about to go off. Agent Miller, the lead investigator, didn't hesitate. She walked straight towards the glass office. Richard looked up. For a second, he looked confused. Then he looked furious. He stormed out of his office. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Richard bellowed. "This is private property. I'll have you all arrested for trespassing." Agent Miller didn't even flinch. She held up a warrant. "Richard Sterling, we have a warrant for the seizure of all electronic devices and financial records. We are shutting down this location pending a federal investigation into wage theft, fraud, and racketeering." "Racketeering?" Richard laughed, but it sounded hysterical. "You're insane! Call my lawyer! Get out of my building!" "Sir, step away from the computer," an officer said, putting a hand on his baton. "I will not!" Richard screamed. He lunged back towards his desk, probably trying to delete files or hide the ledger. That was a mistake. 2 officers grabbed him. Richard fought back. He was thrashing, screaming, spitting. "Don't touch me! Do you know who I am? I am a pillar of this community!" They spun him around and slammed him against the glass wall of his own office. The sound of his expensive suit hitting the glass was the sweetest music I had ever heard. "Stop resisting!" the officer shouted. The click of handcuffs echoed through the silent room. Richard was panting, his face pressed against the glass. His eyes were wild, darting around the room, looking for someone to help him, looking for his family. Nobody moved. Nobody said a word. We just watched. Then he saw me. I was standing by my desk, arms crossed, watching the show. I wasn't hiding anymore. I locked eyes with him, and I smiled. A cold, hard smile. His eyes widened. The realization hit him like a freight train. He knew. In that split second, he put it all together. The doctor's appointments, the silence, the late nights alone in the office. "You!" he screamed, spit flying from his mouth. "You little rat! I made you! You're nothing without me! I'll kill you!" The officers dragged him towards the elevator. As he passed me, he was still screaming, "You're fired! You hear me? You're fired!" I stepped forward. I looked him right in the eyes, inches from his face. "Richard," I said, my voice calm and clear in the silent office, "I don't work for you, and neither does anyone else, not anymore. The elevator doors closed on his screaming face. The agents spent the next 6 hours stripping the place. They took the servers, they took the laptops, they took the boxes of files from under his desk. They interviewed us one by one. When it was my turn, Agent Miller just nodded at me. "Good work," she said quietly. "We got him. He's looking at 10 to 15 years. The tax fraud alone is enough to bury him." Walking out of that building for the last time felt like waking up from a coma. I stood on the sidewalk, holding a box with my few personal belongings: a mug, a picture of my dad, a stapler. The sun was setting, painting the city in gold. I took a deep breath. The air didn't smell like stress and coffee anymore. It smelled like exhaust fumes and freedom. The aftermath was brutal for the company, but glorious for us. Apex Logic was dissolved. The assets were liquidated. It took 6 months, but the class action lawsuit settled. I received a check for every single hour of overtime I had worked, plus punitive damages. It was enough to pay off my debts and take a year off. Richard lost everything. His wife divorced him, his assets were seized. Last I heard, he was awaiting trial, unable to make bail because his accounts were frozen. The shark had drowned. I visited my father's grave a week after the raid. It was a quiet day. I sat in the grass, tracing the letters on his headstone. "I did it, Dad," I whispered. "I didn't let him get away with it. I stood up." I like to think he heard me. I'm not the same person I was before. I'm harder now. I don't trust easily. But I learned a lesson that I will carry for the rest of my life. A job is just a transaction. It is not your life. It is not your worth. And no matter how powerful they seem, no matter how much they threaten you, every tyrant has a breaking point. You just have to be willing to push until they break. So, if you're listening to this and you're sitting in an office right now, terrified of your boss, wondering if this is all there is to life, remember my story. You are not equipment. You are not a slave. And if they try to make you one, burn them down.
Thank you for staying with me until the end. How would you have acted in the protagonist's place? Write your thoughts in the comments. More fresh and controversial stories every day on my profile. Like and subscribe to this channel.